The grand Victorian house, with its intricate gingerbread trim, stained glass windows, and wraparound porch, stood as a proud testament to a bygone era. It was a landmark in the Oakhaven community, a cherished piece of local history. But to Karen, the newly elected president of the Oakhaven Homeowners Association, it was an eyesore, an obstacle, a problem. Mark and Sarah, the new owners, had fallen in love with the house the moment they saw it. They appreciated its craftsmanship, its character, its history. They'd spent months painstakingly restoring it, preserving its original charm while updating it for modern living. They'd poured their hearts and souls and a significant chunk of their savings into making it their dream home. They'd also, unknowingly, walked straight into Karen's crosshairs. The first violation notice arrived just weeks after they moved in. It was about the porch light. According to Karen, the antique gas-style fixture was not in keeping with the modern aesthetic of the neighborhood and needed to be replaced with a contemporary HOA-approved model. Mark and Sarah politely ignored the notice. They'd done their research. The house was on the local historical register, and any exterior modifications required approval from the Historical Society, not the HOA. Karen, however, was not one to be deterred. The notices kept coming, each one more ridiculous than the last. The color of their front door was too bold. It was a historically accurate shade of deep blue. Their wrought iron fence was too ornate. It was original to the house. Their flower garden was too whimsical. It contained a mix of native wildflowers. It was a campaign of harassment, a relentless barrage of petty grievances designed to wear them down, to force them to conform to Karen's narrow, sterile vision of suburban perfection. She wanted Oakhaven to look like a magazine spread, a bland, uniform landscape of beige houses and perfectly manicured lawns. And Mark and Sarah's beautiful, historic home was a glaring exception to her rule. When polite refusal didn't work, Karen escalated her tactics. She started sending contractors, who were in reality just a couple of guys she'd hired off Craigslist, to trim the hedges that bordered their property, leaving them butchered and uneven. She began filing noise complaints with the city, claiming that Mark and Sarah were hosting loud parties. They weren't. She even went so far as to report them to the Historical Society, falsely claiming that they were making unauthorized modifications to the house. Mark and Sarah were bewildered, frustrated, and increasingly angry. They'd moved to Oakhaven for its peaceful, small-town charm, but they were quickly discovering that beneath the veneer of suburban tranquility lurked a petty tyrant, determined to make their lives miserable. They were living in a nightmare, a constant battle against a woman who seemed to have nothing better to do than harass them. They had bought their dream home, but they were quickly realizing that they had also bought into a war they hadn't anticipated, a war against Karen and her relentless pursuit of conformity. The sound that woke Mark and Sarah that morning wasn't the gentle chirping of birds or the distant hum of traffic. It was the guttural roar of a diesel engine, the grinding of metal on metal, the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery. They rushed to the window, their hearts pounding with a sense of dread. Parked directly in front of their house, blocking their driveway, was a bulldozer. A bright yellow, monstrous machine, its blade gleaming menacingly in the morning sun. And standing beside it, her arms crossed, her face a mask of smug satisfaction, was Karen. "What the hell is going on here?" Mark shouted, throwing open the front door and storming outside, Sarah close behind him. Karen turned to face them, a chilling smile playing on her lips. "Good morning, Mark, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I trust you slept well." "What is this?" Mark demanded, gesturing towards the bulldozer. "What are you doing?" "I'm afraid your house has been deemed a hazard to the community," Karen announced, her voice ringing with authority. It's structurally unsound, a danger to public safety. The HOA has issued a demolition order. Mark and Sarah stared at her, speechless with disbelief. A demolition order, Mark finally sputtered. Are you insane? This house is on the historical register. It's been inspected, approved, certified. You can't just... Oh, I can, Karen interrupted, her smile widening. And I have. The HOA has the authority to take any action necessary to protect the safety and well-being of our community. And this eyesore, she said, gesturing towards the house with a look of utter disdain, is a clear and present danger. Show me the order, Mark demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Show me the paperwork. Karen, with a theatrical flourish, produced a single sheet of paper from her clipboard. It was a crudely typed document bearing the Oakhaven HOA logo at the top and a jumble of legal-sounding jargon below. It was signed by Karen herself as president of the HOA and countersigned by no one. Mark scanned the document, his eyes narrowing. It was a fake, a blatant amateurish forgery. It wouldn't hold up in a court of law for 5 seconds. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice shaking with anger. This isn't a legal document. You can't just make up your own demolition order? Oh, but I can, Karen repeated, her eyes gleaming with malicious glee. I'm the president of the HOA. I have the authority. And this house, she said, pointing at the bulldozer, is coming down. She turned to the operator of the bulldozer, a burly man with a blank expression, and nodded. Get started, she said. The engine roared to life, the blade lowered, and the machine began to move, slowly, inexorably, towards Mark and Sarah's beautiful historic home. The nightmare had reached a new level of absurdity, of cruelty, of blatant disregard for the law. And Mark and Sarah, standing on their front porch, watching their dream home threatened with destruction, knew that they were in for the fight of their lives. Mark, despite the surge of adrenaline and the overwhelming urge to physically confront Karen, knew that violence wouldn't solve anything. He had to be smart. He had to be strategic. He had to use the law, Karen's twisted version of it, against her. He pulled out his phone and started recording, making sure to capture Karen's smug expression, the bulldozer looming menacingly in the background, and the forged demolition order. Karen, he said, his voice calm but firm, his phone camera trained on her, I'm warning you, this is illegal. You have no legal authority to demolish this house, and anyone who participates in this act of vandalism will be held liable, both civilly and criminally. He turned to the bulldozer operator, his voice now carrying the weight of authority. Sir, he said, I urge you to reconsider. This is not a legal demolition. There is no court order. There is no permit. If you damage this house, you will be personally liable for the damages, and you could face criminal charges. The operator, a burly man who had initially seemed indifferent, now hesitated. He looked at Karen, then at Mark, then back at the forged document. He'd been hired to do a job, but he wasn't stupid. He knew the difference between a legitimate demolition order and a piece of paper cooked up by a power-hungry HOA president. Lady, he said to Karen, his voice gruff, I need to see a real demolition permit, something from the city, something with a judge's signature. Otherwise, I'm not touching this house. Karen's face turned a shade of red that clashed violently with her pastel-colored tracksuit. Don't you dare question my authority, she shrieked. I am the president of the HOA. I have the power to... You have the power to get yourself arrested, Mark interrupted, his voice cold and unwavering. And that's exactly what's going to happen if you don't stop this right now. The bulldozer operator, sensing that he was caught in the middle of a legal minefield, shut off the engine. I'm out, he said, shaking his head. I'm not getting involved in this mess. He climbed down from the cab, his face a mixture of annoyance and relief. Karen, her carefully constructed facade of authority crumbling, was now consumed by a blind, unreasoning rage. She grabbed a crowbar from the back of the bulldozer, her eyes blazing with fury. "Fine," she screamed. "If you won't do it, I'll do it myself." She charged towards the house, wielding the crowbar like a weapon, and began to smash at the front door, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the suddenly silent street. "Karen, stop!" Mark shouted, but his words were lost in the fury of her attack. He knew he had to act quickly. He dialed 911, his voice urgent. "I need police at address," he said. "The HOA president is vandalizing my property. She's out of control. She's got a crowbar." He watched, his heart pounding, as Karen continued her assault on his house, a scene of utter madness unfolding before his eyes. He had to stop her, but he knew that any physical intervention could escalate the situation, could give her the excuse she needed to claim self-defense. He had to wait for the police, to let the law, however flawed, take its course. The scene was a surreal tableau of suburban warfare. A historic house, a raging HOA president, a bulldozer, a crowbar, and a man on the phone, desperately trying to hold on to some semblance of sanity and order in the face of utter chaos. The wail of sirens cut through the air, a welcome sound that signaled the arrival of the cavalry, the end of Karen's unhinged rampage. Two police cars screeched to a halt in front of the house, officers jumping out, their hands on their holsters, their eyes taking in the scene of utter chaos. Karen, still wielding the crowbar, standing amidst the splintered remains of the front door. Mark, calmly filming the scene with his phone. The idle bulldozer, a silent witness to the madness. And the gathering crowd of neighbors, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of schadenfreude. "What the hell is going on here?" one of the officers demanded, his voice booming through the sudden silence. Karen, momentarily startled by the arrival of the police, lowered the crowbar, but her defiant expression remained. "Officer," she said, her voice dripping with self-righteous indignation, "I am the president of the HOA, and this house is in violation of numerous community guidelines. I have issued a demolition order and—" "A demolition order?" The officer interrupted, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. "Let me see that." Karen, with a smug smile, handed him the forged document, the one Mark had already exposed as a blatant fabrication. The officer scanned it quickly, his frown deepening with each passing second. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now laced with suspicion, This isn't a legal document. This is just a piece of paper with the HOA logo on it." "It's perfectly legal," Karen insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "I have the authority. I'm the president." Mark stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Officers," he said, his voice calm and controlled, "this woman has been harassing my wife and me for months. She's been trying to force us to make unnecessary and illegal changes to our house, and now she's trying to demolish it based on a forged document." He handed the officers a folder containing his meticulously gathered evidence, copies of the HOA bylaws, the Historical Society's preservation guidelines, the city's building codes, and, most importantly, a certificate from the city, clearly stating that his house was a designated historical landmark, protected from any unauthorized demolition or alteration. The officers examined the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern to outright anger. It was clear that Karen had not only overstepped her authority, but had also committed several serious crimes. "Ma'am," the officer said to Karen, his voice now devoid of any respect, "you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." Karen's face crumpled. The smugness, the defiance, the self-righteous indignation, all vanished, replaced by a look of utter defeat. She stared at the officers, at the handcuffs, at the gathering crowd of neighbors, her world collapsing around her, as the officers led her away, her hands cuffed behind her back. She tried one last, desperate plea. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "You haven't heard the last of me. I'll sue you all." But her words were lost in the rising murmur of the crowd, the sound of justice finally being served, the sound of a community reclaiming its peace from the clutches of a petty tyrant. The scene, captured on countless cell phones, would soon become another chapter in the ongoing saga of Karen's downfall, a testament to the enduring power of truth, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the inevitable consequences of unchecked power and unbridled arrogance. The ride to the police station was a silent, agonizing journey for Karen. The reality of her situation, the sheer magnitude of her downfall, began to sink in. She was no longer the powerful HOA president, able to control and intimidate her neighbors with impunity. She was just another suspect, facing serious criminal charges, her reputation in tatters, her future uncertain. As she sat in the back of the patrol car, staring out at the passing streets, the faces of her neighbors, the people she had so relentlessly harassed, flashed through her mind. She had convinced herself that she was acting in their best interests, that she was maintaining property values, that she was upholding the standards of the community. But now, stripped of her power and facing the consequences of her actions, she was forced to confront the truth. She had been driven by ego, by a need for control, by a deep-seated insecurity that manifested itself as a relentless pursuit of conformity. At the police station, she was fingerprinted, photographed, and booked. The process was cold, impersonal, and utterly humiliating. She, Karen Thompson, the self-proclaimed guardian of Oakhaven's aesthetic standards, was now just another number in the system, another suspect facing the weight of the law. She was allowed one phone call. She considered calling her lawyer, but then realized that her usual attorney, the one who had helped her draft those threatening letters to her neighbors, would likely be of little use in this situation. He was a real estate lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney. And besides, she had alienated him, along with everyone else in her life, with her constant demands and her overbearing personality. She finally decided to call her brother, Robert, the one who owned the sham security company, but the call went straight to voicemail. She left a desperate, rambling message, pleading for his help, begging him to bail her out, to fix this mess. But deep down, she knew it was hopeless. Robert, like everyone else, would likely abandon her, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. News of Karen's arrest spread quickly through Oakhaven. The HOA, sensing an opportunity to distance themselves from the scandal, issued a statement condemning Karen's actions and assuring residents that they were cooperating fully with the police investigation. They emphasized that Karen had acted unilaterally and without the knowledge or consent of the board. They were, in essence, throwing her under the bus, sacrificing her to save their own reputations. The statement was a lie, of course. The other board members had, at the very least, been complicit in Karen's behavior, turning a blind eye to her excesses and enabling her reign of terror. But now, with Karen exposed and facing criminal charges, they were eager to rewrite history, to portray themselves as innocent bystanders, victims of Karen's manipulations. As Karen sat alone in her holding cell, awaiting her arraignment, the full weight of her isolation, her abandonment, her utter ruin crashed down on her. She had lost everything: her power, her reputation, her friends, if she'd ever had any, and potentially her freedom. And it was all because of her own actions, her own choices, her own relentless pursuit of control. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, a devastating truth that she could no longer deny. Her carefully constructed world, built on lies, intimidation, and a twisted sense of entitlement, had crumbled, leaving her alone and exposed, facing the consequences of her own hubris. The legal proceedings against Karen unfolded swiftly, each new revelation adding another layer of complexity and severity to her already precarious situation. What had initially seemed like a case of simple vandalism and HOA overreach was quickly escalating into something far more serious. The most damaging blow came during a routine title search on Mark and Sarah's property. A diligent clerk at the county recorder's office discovered a document buried deep within the property records that changed everything. The document revealed that Mark and Sarah's house wasn't just a locally designated historical landmark. It was also listed on the National Register of Historic Places, affording it protection under federal law. This discovery had profound implications for Karen. It meant that her act of vandalism, her crowbar-wielding assault on the front door, wasn't just a misdemeanor property crime, it was a federal offense. She had, unwittingly, attacked a piece of American history, a structure deemed worthy of preservation by the United States government. The news sent shockwaves through the legal system. The local police, who had initially been investigating Karen for relatively minor offenses, were now forced to coordinate with federal authorities, including the FBI. The charges against Karen were upgraded, her potential penalties significantly increased. She now faced not only fines and restitution for the damage to the house, but also the possibility of substantial prison time and crippling federal fines. The National Historic Preservation Act, the law she had violated, carried severe penalties designed to deter anyone from damaging or destroying historically significant structures. Karen's lawyer, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, advised her to cooperate with the authorities, to plead guilty, to hope for leniency. But Karen, ever defiant, ever convinced of her own righteousness, refused. She insisted that she was the victim, that Mark and Sarah had provoked her, that the historical designation was a technicality that shouldn't apply to her. Her intransigence, her refusal to accept responsibility for her actions, only served to further alienate the authorities and strengthen their resolve to prosecute her to the fullest extent of the law. The case against her was overwhelming, the evidence irrefutable, her defenses pathetic and unconvincing. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Karen's financial resources dwindled, her reputation plummeted, and her support network evaporated. She was a pariah, a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked power and the devastating consequences of arrogance and prejudice. Her dream of transforming Oak Haven into her own personal fiefdom, of imposing her will on her neighbors, of controlling every detail of their lives, had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. She had set out to destroy a house, but in the end, she had destroyed herself. The historic house, meanwhile, stood strong, a testament to the enduring power of the past and a symbol of the community's resilience in the face of tyranny. Karen's attempt to erase history had, ironically, cemented her own place in it, not as a visionary leader, but as a footnote, a cautionary example of what happens when power is unchecked and prejudice goes unchallenged. The removal of Karen from Oak Haven was like the lifting of a heavy, suffocating fog. The atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted dramatically, almost overnight. The tension that had hung in the air, the fear that had permeated every interaction, the sense of constant surveillance and judgment all dissipated, replaced by a newfound sense of freedom, of relief, of genuine community spirit. The HOA, now under new interim leadership, moved quickly to distance itself from Karen's actions. They issued a public apology to Mark and Sarah and to all the residents of Oak Haven, acknowledging the past abuses of power and pledging to create a more transparent, inclusive and resident-focused association. The absurd rules that Karen had so zealously enforced were repealed one by one. Residents were once again free to paint their front doors in colors of their choosing, to plant gardens that reflected their individual tastes, to hang Christmas lights, within reason of course, and to generally live their lives without fear of arbitrary fines and petty harassment. The change was palpable. People started smiling at each other again, stopping to chat on the street, offering to help with yard work, organizing potlucks and block parties. The sense of community, which had been stifled under Karen's reign, began to blossom, nourished by a shared sense of relief and a renewed commitment to neighborly cooperation. Mark and Sarah, their historic house now safe from Karen's destructive impulses, became symbols of resilience and resistance. They were hailed as heroes, not just for standing up to Karen, but for inspiring the community to reclaim its voice and its power. The restored front door, meticulously repaired and repainted, in its original, historically accurate shade of deep blue, became a visual representation of that victory. It stood as a testament to the enduring power of preservation, not just of historic buildings, but of community values, of individual rights, and of the fundamental principle of fairness. As the months passed, Oak Haven healed. The scars of Karen's tyranny began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of optimism and a determination to never again allow one person to wield so much unchecked power. The HOA, once a tool of oppression, became a genuine forum for community engagement, a place where residents could work together to improve their neighborhood, not to control it. The story of Karen and her attempt to demolish a historic house became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of standing up for what's right. But it was also a story of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, a community united can overcome any obstacle, can reclaim its freedom, and can build a better future, one brick, one garden, one brightly colored front door at a time. This HOA conflict, centered around a historic home and a power-hungry president, offers a potent reminder that the principles of fairness, respect, and community are timeless. Karen's downfall underscores the danger of unchecked authority, even in seemingly small settings like a homeowners association. It highlights the importance of vigilance, of speaking out against injustice, and of not being afraid to challenge those who abuse their power. The story also celebrates the power of resilience and the strength found in unity. The neighbors, initially cowed by Karen's intimidation, ultimately found their voices and reclaimed their community. This speaks to the enduring human spirit and capacity to build strong relationships. As we age, we bring a unique perspective, shaped by years of experience. This story reminds us that our voices matter, that our participation in civic life is crucial, and that we have a responsibility to mentor younger generations, encouraging them to uphold the values of justice and community engagement. Preserving what truly matters, whether a historic home or the principles of fairness, requires ongoing effort and a willingness to stand up for what we believe in before situations escalate.